back with ET now. This is the India development debate and time to put the spotlight on the second debate tonight. Prime Minister Modi's Make in India dream is taking wings. South Korean electronics giant Samsung today opened its largest mobile handset plant in Noida, which has been built at a cost of around 5,000 crore rupees. The opening of the facility coincides with a steady rise in electronics import, which stands next only to crude oil in value terms. Interestingly, top industrialists like Anand, Mahindra and Uday, Kotak have already cautioned against this trend, saying that it is high time India, which is one of the largest market for electronics products, recasts its FDI policy to attract global players and give a push to Indian ones.
Now, Samsung's largest comes at a time when the NDA government is under attack for its failure to give a leg up to the manufacturing industry here in India. Also, the slow pickup in industrial output has often been cited as one of the reasons for the failure on the jobs front. So what can make India an ideal destination for global electronics manufacturers? Can India afford such a high import bill as far as electronics are concerned, next only to oil? And finally, considering the heavy potential of this industry, isn't high time that manufacturing policy is completely overhauled? The debate with these crucial issues is what we're putting the focus and spotlight on the show in the second edition of the India Development Debate. And joining us is a very special panel: Pankaj Mahindra, National President, Indian Cellular Association; Pankaj Gulati, President of Electronic Industries Association of India, also EVP and CEO, Continental Device India Limited; Sanjay Kapoor, former CEO, Bharti Airtel and former Chairman, Micromax; Mohan Guruswamy, Visiting Professor, Administrative Staff, College of India. Thanks each one of you for being with us. And Sanjay, if I may actually begin with you, Samsung's plant in Noida is the largest mobile phone factory in the world. It's built over 35 acres, if I'm told. At a cost of 4,500 crore rupees, the plant can produce 12 crore smartphones every year and is estimated to create about 15,000 local jobs. How big a deal is this?
So, Supriya, when we talk about Make in India and the earlier steps that we've taken towards the Make in India, especially for the mobile industry, I think this is a real game changer and is akin to what Maruti did to automotive industry some time back. Very clearly, if you want to establish an ecosystem of partnerships, of components and real transfer of technology, then you need to create a scale, and also you need to be cognizant of a business model. The business model that has been pursued in India, at least as far as the mobiles are concerned, was a trading business model where people were trading, getting stuff from China, Taiwan, Korea and selling it in India. And there was no intention to really transfer technology or to manufacture other than the arbitrage that existed for customs duty. And that was the only leverage and motivation for most. At least that's what was visible to the eye. This is the first time when we are getting somebody with size and scale, and Samsung, as they are known, by and large manufacture everything concerning the phone themselves. So they're coming here, building up such a large plant, making such a huge investment is not a Mickey Mouse strategy of assembling phones. I'm sure this is going to be followed with attracting a complete ecosystem where batteries, boards, software, and you name it, you will have them here or a potential to have them here as time progresses, because they also want it to be a hub for feeding rest of the world. So I think it's a very positive step and it's a game changer. A new business model will emerge, and I hope this will also bring in scale from likes of Foxconn and others who are ODMs of scale. And you know, those individual games to manufacture for one single brand will not be sustainable, was never sustainable. So I think this is really a new game that India is going to see, and probably our first step in telecom industry to see Make in India probably potentially be true.
You're calling it, in short, a watershed moment for electronics manufacturing in India. Mohan Guruswamy, do you agree with Sanjay Kapoor there? I mean, let's put this in perspective. Samsung plans to make India its export hub for countries in Europe, Middle East and Africa. Given the size and scale of the investment and what's at stake, is this a big win for the government's flagship Make in India program?
Well, it's a good beginning. 5,000 crores is not huge money, but it's not bird feed either. It's pretty good. But let's not forget that we had the Nokia factory in Chennai, which employed 12,000 workers and was producing 100 million handsets. Then the income tax people slapped it with the 21,000 crore rupees tax. And the plant, when Nokia was sold, the buyer, the new buyer, Microsoft, didn't want the plant because it was saddled with this litigation. So these are things government policy gets into the way. It's not that India has no labor, India doesn't have a market, but we have policies which screw up everything. We had a beautiful, and this beautiful Nokia factory is still sitting idle because it cannot be sold. And then we have competitive trade unionism. The trade unions destroyed what little there was of Nokia. They didn't get anything in the end. They're all jobless. So these are things we need protection against. If a new factory comes, then it needs to be protected, insulated against all this. I don't know how the government is going to enact laws. In Rajasthan, they've done some laws. I think the states need to enact laws. I don't know if the Swamiji's laws can enact any laws in UP. But I think these are the protections. And if these protections are there, a lot of factories will come. A lot more industries will come. But we have to get out of this regulation thicket. But I think it's a good beginning that Samsung has come. Samsung is not new to India. They already make air conditioners, refrigerators, televisions, whatnot in India. And again, I must caution, it cannot be just assembly and press-tight kind of manufacturing like some of the other mobile phone companies have been doing. You've got to make the components here.
Yes. Mr. Guruswamy, we are touching upon that particular subject, which is assembly versus real manufacturing, in just a bit from now. But you've really led me on to my next question, that if this is a successful experiment, we'll perhaps see many more walking in. Pankaj Mahindra, coming to you. According to International Data Corp, India's smartphone market grew by about 14%, with total shipments of 124 million units in, I think, 2017. This is the fastest pace of growth amongst the top 20 markets in the world. Clearly, demand will only surge given the data drive that we are seeing as prices come down. Chinese smartphone maker Xiaomi Corp has said that in April it will set up 3 more factories in India. Do you expect many more to follow suit? Is Samsung going to be the trigger with which many more will come in? Pankaj Mahindra.
No, Supriya, this is going exactly as per plan. You know what Sanjay said, Mickey Mouse manufacturing. We've had more than 120 factories getting set up here. And APTP, which was the first thing in the phased manufacturing program, started off in 2015-16. And then we went in for a very deep and profound phased manufacturing program, which is seeing battery packs, chargers, headsets, mechanics, camera modules, PCBA assembly, PCBA population, and all this happening. So there is a much deeper intent, and the target given to us was 500 million to be produced by 2019-20 and 120 million to be exported by 2019-20. And that is happening now. We are halfway there. I am again stressing that this is going exactly as per plan. The smartphone explosion in India has not yet started. It's just the inflection point. We estimate that in the next 3 to 4 years, we'll be selling approximately 350 million smartphones in a year in India. But the entire mindset has to change. We are very confident that the industry is developing green shoots. Samsung is one event. Let's enjoy it. Let's not remember the past. As they say, all dead men are good and all brides are beautiful. Let's enjoy this moment. There are many more to come. In the next 1 year, you will see some staggering announcements and some very, very serious global manufacturing capacities coming up in India.
Okay, that's a good point you're making, Pankaj.
But I'll go with Guruswamy ji.
Okay, allow me to interrupt you, Pankaj Mahindra. Let me get in a word from Pankaj Gulati as well. It's an important point you're making that this is the first step. Let's celebrate this moment, and there are more successes coming our way, more investments coming our way. We can all only hope for that. But Mr. Gulati, let's put this in context. You know, we talk a lot about the fact that the government does tom-tom, the fact that how India is already some sort of an electronic manufacturing hub. But is it really? I mean, there were 2 manufacturers in 2014. We now have 123 manufacturers as of February this year. But are these made in India or assembled in India? And does this in any sense reflect the so-called manufacturing prowess of our country?
Is that addressed?
Please go ahead, Mr. Gulati.
Okay. Firstly, I congratulate Samsung on opening of this plant, the largest plant in the world. But we need to go back a little and see why and how it came about. I think a lot of effort has been put in by the MeitY and the ICA. Pankaj Mahindra is sitting right there, to move the mobile phone out of the ITA1 product list. Now, the ITA1 product list is something that the Indian manufacturers have been struggling through since 2005. The mobile phones were moved out of this list, and thereafter, with the efforts of the ICA and MeitY, a phased manufacturing program was instituted. Now, this phased manufacturing program, in a way, made it difficult for the companies to start importing products and just assembling it. So slowly it's moving as per the plan. Started in 2015-16. I think it'll get over by 19-20, by which time a very large amount of mobiles will be manufactured. But we need to go a little more deeper into this. We need to understand how much is the value addition being done on the mobile phones today. If you look at a mobile phone part, yes, value addition would be done. But the components, the PCBs that go into it, this is what we now need to focus on. As what Pankaj said, we expect that we will have a lot of other companies, the whole ecosystem building up around Samsung, but will it? That's a question mark. As an association of electronics, as a manufacturer of components that I have, if the components are going to be imported duty-free, if the PCBs keep coming in duty-free, what will prompt these companies, the mobile phone manufacturing companies, to bring in manufacturing of the hardcore components where the value addition sits at 30-35%, while in a mobile phone, if you look at an EMS line, the valuation would probably be made 10-15%. So if we need the real value addition manufacturing coming into India, we have to focus on the component part of it, which means the PC boards, the basic components, and for that, I believe that the government of India needs to do something on the ITA1 products to stop the zero imports. If we cannot, there are various ways to do it. A lot of suggestions have been put up with MeitY. Unless this is done, the bare board component and the PCB manufacturing will not start, so the real value addition will not come. Another point I would like to highlight is that if 100 employed in an EMS line to manufacture a part, we need to remember that you go further down, go to the component level, you need thousands of people.
Right. Pankaj, Pankaj Gulati, you're actually giving me a cue for my next question, and I will take that to Sanjay Kapoor. Pankaj Gulati, just hold your thoughts there, because Sanjay, the reality is that I find it very ironical, and it is indeed great irony, that the new threat to India's current account deficit is not coming up from firming oil prices, but it's actually now coming from relentless rising imports of electronic items, especially mobile phones. And the issue here is that imports of mobile phones are down from 205 million in 2014 to 77 million in 2017, but it's the import of components that have risen from $1.4 billion in 2014 to $9.2 billion that it could be in 2018 and perhaps $11.4 billion in 2019. Is this make in India, or is this assemble in India? I mean, look at how import of real, phones have gone down, but the import of components have gone up.
But the value addition has gone up.
That can't be surprising. So Supriya, that can't be a surprise for anybody. When you look at the whole telecom, this is not a surprise for anybody, because the whole telecom industry really lacks any innovative model for the operators in India. whether they are the device guys or whether they are the service providers or the infrastructure manufacturers. By and large, all the innovation on products especially comes from other parts of the world, and manufacturing of telecom and the brains behind that, which is the design elements of how a phone gets created, happens outside India. So obviously we have to import. We don't have any business model developed in India or any company that came up which developed any Indian model which had both the hardware component of the design and the software component of the design, which was really made in India. And therefore we had to rely on imports, and that continues. Now the fact is that the market, which is one of the largest markets in the world and has yet to mature from feature phones to smartphones completely, like some of my friends said, and Pankaj Mahindra said that, we have 124 million smartphones today. But this is just the beginning, because we still have 2G networks running in this country. Can you imagine the day the 2G networks come to an end of life? What is going to happen to the transformation of smartphones in this country? It's going to be a huge leap, and we have not seen that. So I think this is a window to address that problem, to make sure how can we bring the ecosystems back home and start developing even components here and bring down our exports.
Sure.
But imports. But if we don't do that, this is going to continue. In fact, the deficit is going to be much bigger than what exists today, because the real peak of the smartphone devices has not hit the country as yet. We have yet to see that, when the minimum standards in this country are only going to be 4G and 5G in future.
Okay, that's a good point.
It's going to be an era completely dominated by smartphones, and yeah.
That's a good point, Sanjay. And Pankaj Mahindra, I want to react to that. What's the way out? Do we need to insist on local manufacturing of componentry? Should that be a condition? And if I may add to that, one of the biggest criticisms against Indian mobile phone makers has been that they get license and SOPs for not making, but assembling in India. Isn't there a greater need for linking SOPs to indigenization of products? A lot like how it happens in China. The more indigenized the product is, the more incentives you will get from the government.
No, that's not exactly it. There are, I think Mr. Guruswamy touched a very sensitive nerve, that is about the general ease of doing business. So we have some structural issues which we are sorting out along the way. The ease of doing business is one of them, infrastructure is the other one. We need a strong dose of incentivization and creating competitiveness at a basic level on electronic manufacturing. There is a big rise in component import, but the value addition, the amount of foreign exchange we've saved is around 25,000 crores. If all of this had been imported, because we were left with, as Mohan said, only the tatters of the industry were remaining in November 2014, when this task force was set up and the whole planning happened. But this has to be a very, very large project, because what Sanjay said, that it is just the beginning of the 350, 400 million smartphones which are going to be sold. We need to get the design in action very quickly, and that is where design, skill development, ease of doing business, these are the three parameters which we need to get quickly. As far as organic factors are concerned, which is our people, India has labor supply which is compared to none in the world today, the demographic dividend. So tomorrow we are looking at not only these 120 factories, but more than 1500 plants of components, the first tier components and the second tier components, and large manufacturing plants. But the smaller plants, which are the second tier and third tier, are equally valuable. And that is where Pankaj Gulati and this ecosystem has to kick in. The first was to bring the brands in, the big EMS companies, the big ODM companies, then get the PMP into action,
Right.
and then
Right.
energize a complete vertical of the second tier component manufacturers. This is how value addition comes in. But design will be the key.
True. Okay. Pankaj Mahindra, you made a point there. I'll take this across to Pankaj Gulati. And Pankaj Gulati, it's all very good to boast of manufacturing facilities here. But is there a mobile manufacturing ecosystem in India in terms of semiconductors and all of that? You know, it's all very good to say that people are importing. It's because the ecosystem lacks in the country.
Right. I mean, as of now, I think there is hardly any ecosystem to manufacture the components that are supplied into the mobile phones, whether it be PCB or any of the other components. But as what Pankaj Mahindra has just mentioned, I think what will happen is when the volumes start building up, it'll probably start attracting some ecosystem, some support structures coming in and supporting these volumes. It's not easy to continue to import these components. You need to have a longer planning. It has to be on a cycle time. You have to, everything goes into a spin moment you import components. Today, it's easy to import because the volumes are not that high. Moment plants like this, maybe 5, 10 such plants start moving in huge volumes, it'll be an attraction. It'll be a pull for the components to start coming in. The first thing that we'll probably have in the components is to start doing the assembly of components. When you said semiconductors, since you mentioned semiconductors, we first expect the ATMP lines coming in, which means the assembly, test, mark, tape. You bring in the dice and you assemble for the phones and you give it to the guys here. The second stage will then be the programming, the other detailed infrastructures. Wafer fab probably comes in at the last. But yes, it will have to happen, and it is going to happen in the next 5 to 7 years if this continues to happen. The plants like Samsung, other large manufacturers, if they come in here, they will possibly be the center point for bringing in the rest of the ecosystem. I mean, I believe in that, but at the same time, the government of India needs to support on the infrastructure. They need to support on certain capital infusion support. They need to support on the taxes. There are various reasons that the plants are not coming in. I mean, I've been traveling to various countries and talking to the companies. Pankaj Mahindra was with me in one of the trips. You talk to those guys, you need to understand that what is going to attract them to India. Market, of course, but the rest of it, there has to be some incentive, something better than what the neighboring countries are offering for them to start manufacturing here. That's what I believe.
Okay, that's a good point you're making. But, you know, since we are talking on this point, Mohan Guruswamy, I wanted to weigh in on our competitiveness vis-a-vis some of the other, you know, markets. And, you know, Pankaj Gulati alluded to it, but how competitive is Indian manufacturing when compared to China and Taiwan? And in some sense, you know, we've resorted to, in the last budget, imposing duties as a way to make Indian manufacturing more competitive. Does that work? Is that a solution at all? You know, will that alone make us competitive?
I don't think so. Look, when Apple 6 was first made in the Foxconn factory in Chengdu, the value addition to that in that factory was only about $8 for a $300 Apple phone. But the Chinese accepted it. It was being made slowly. There were parts being made. Even now, the phones which are made, the Apple phones which are made in China, which is the world's largest facility to manufacture electronics at Foxconn, Chengdu, most of it is imported. The glass comes imported, the keyboard comes imported, and it's all put together, and there are small components which are made in China, because you can't have a Gorilla Glass factory, now which is in Malaysia and Taiwan, suddenly to come to China and India. That won't happen. But the competitiveness comes in labor discipline, labor productivity, you know, and you know, be able to be flexible in manufacturing. When Steve Jobs decided that he didn't like the glass on the Apple 6, iPhone 6, he wanted it changed overnight. The entire 3 shifts came out to work in Foxconn in Chengdu with just tea and biscuits to produce the quantity required for the launch. Now, can we have that kind of a thing in India? Can we have that kind of... So, you know, you've got to worry about these things, because if you're going to compete in the global marketplace, your productivity levels should be at global levels. And that's not there in India. As soon as we have labor, the unions arrive, and then they start feeding off the managements and the owners and make life difficult. So you've got to insulate these companies somehow from this kind of practice. and by education and keeping the unions off, keeping discipline in. There are lots of things to be done. It's not easy to function. I ran a factory in India. I know it's very difficult to run a factory in India. You're constantly being harassed by labor. Look at what's happened in Maruti. Highest paying wages in Faridabad, in Gurgaon. Yet they have labor trouble. And you have to be watching out for all this.
Okay, let me just take this across to...
Don't look...
Yes. Mr. Guruswamy, just give me a minute now. I want to go across to Sanjay Kapoor. And Sanjay Kapoor, do Indian companies stand a chance in this entire debate, in this entire environment? And how will the local guys compete with the big guys with really deep pockets? Or as Anand Mahindra suggested, should we form a consortium of Indian companies that jointly have the capital, the technology and the staying power to compete?
So, Supriya, I think some bit of decision has already been taken, at least in consumers' mind, on some of these things. There was a phase when there was a choice open for Indian brands to move up the value chain and occupy the slots in smartphone categories. But I think somewhere the Chinese ODMs came in and threw them out with better quality, a better value for money. And then actually the stone was really cast, and the Indian brands moved down or kept down at the feature phone levels and probably lowest end of smartphones. And now I think when the market graduates, when the experience of infrastructure, which is 4G, 5G graduates, I don't think those brands have a fair chance to get back into the reckoning of a quality customer, of an experience demanding customer, and the road will be very uphill. And especially the fact that bulk of them remain traders and never graduated to becoming, or getting into the know-how of the design elements, whether hardware or software, I think has really left them lurching, because they seem to be traders to most of the markets. There could be one or two exceptions, but I think winning the brand game now against either the Chinese guys or the world, leading brands like Apple or Samsung, I don't think is possible. I think it will be very, very difficult for anybody to come back and now really participate in the smartphone category, given the slots that they relinquished and moved out of.
Oh, indeed. That's a tragedy, isn't it? Even as we celebrate this mega investment made there by Samsung, a tragedy that in some sense Indian or homegrown manufacturers are not going to potentially get the upside of this likely electronic manufacturing boom that we're going to see in India. But there's consensus, at least in our... Pankaj Mahindra, I think you want to make a quick word. We're closing, but I'll give 10 seconds for a closing comment from you.
I don't agree with Sanjay entirely. There's been a weak phase for Indian brands. While we don't see, the market as Indian, Korean, Chinese, etc.
Sure.
But let me tell you, there is a strong resolve, and people are getting into the third gear, not into the fifth gear as Sanjay would have wished, but into the third gear. Some very sure steps are being taken to fortify these companies, and you'll get a pleasant surprise.
Well, let's hope for that. As Indians, we'll only hope that our companies move into fifth gear and compete with these global giants. But as consumers, we'll of course be demanding, as Sanjay pointed out. Timed out then on this edition of India Development Debate. Thank you to this wonderful panel for taking time out and joining us on ET Now. We do hope Samsung's plant triggers a lot more manufacturing. What will get the tech titans to make in India isn't just SOPs, but a conducive, stable and predictable policy environment.
Indeed, but as mobile manufacturing does pick up, India will have to plan ahead. Look at things like e-waste and how to tackle this. I, for instance, got about 10 odd mobile phones at home and I don't know what to do with any of them. But for now, of course, let's raise a toast and celebrate today's big development. The world's largest mobile phone manufacturing plant comes up right here in India. In fact, at a stone's throw distance away from our Noida studios here in this city. Thanks very much for being with us on this edition of the India Development Debate.